你好Oi Hello 再聊 Hello สวัสดีค่ะ
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome to International Student Stories. I am your host, Simon Hamlin. Even though our guest today, Danny Nguyen, technically is not and was not an international student, his story absolutely fits what the International Student Stories podcast is all about. At a very young age, Danny and his family fled Vietnam to come to the U.S. His parents risked their lives to give Danny and his siblings a new start. In our interview, Danny talks about his sense of awe in coming to the U.S. and the challenges he had in adjusting to life in the U.S. A big theme in our conversation is finding a sense of belonging, fitting in. Danny ended up finding a career path in the world of higher education, in spite of his own struggles and rebellion toward his high school and college education. Today, he is the Vice President of Administrative Services at Mission College. He works directly with international students, and I have to believe his experience coming to the U.S. at a young age and navigating the world of education helps Danny relate to international students on a deeper level. This is part one of a two-part interview with Danny. Make sure to tune in to part two, which will come out in a few weeks. Before we jump into Danny's interview, please help us share these inspiring stories with as many people as possible. Take a minute to subscribe to and follow the International Student Stories podcast. You can also rate us, share the podcast with others, and write a review. Go ahead and pause this episode right now so you can take action. We really appreciate your help. Now, I'd like to introduce Danny Nguyen in this episode of International Student Stories. Hi, Danny.
Hi, Simon.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. And you're coming to us from your office on the campus of Mission College, right?
I am, our beautiful Mission College campus in Santa Clara, California. Yes.
Excellent. I'm going to ask a question about your home first, actually. So I know you're in your office, but I'm going to ask you to think to your home of all the pictures you currently have showing in your home. And this could be artwork. It could be family photographs. What is your favorite?
My favorite picture is a picture of my family on a fairly recent family trip several years ago. We did a cabin trip, and there was a hot tub there. And for some reason, we all decided, you know what? We're going to get into this hot tub. And so this is my whole family, 5 siblings, parents, nieces, nephews. I think we had a family friend there. Yeah, one of my nieces had her friend there. I don't think we had any dogs in the hot tub, but a good number of us, and all crammed into this hot tub. And then one of our friends stood up on the balcony and took a picture down, and we were all looking up. And to this day, we all look at it and marvel at it, because I don't know how we all fit in there. And then the trend nowadays is to reproduce these pictures, right? I don't think there's any prospect of being able to do that. But it's my favorite picture, and everybody comments on it because everybody just looks so happy and just so in the moment. And it really represents kind of just how tight-knit our family is and just how we feel when we're around each other. So it makes me smile every time I see it.
That sounds very joyous. Well, not to break that smile, but and this is actually a good segue with talking about water and family and being all kind of crammed together. I want to revisit your early childhood when your family fled Vietnam by boat. You were what was called and is called a boat person. What year was it and what age when your family fled Vietnam?
That was 1977, and I was 4 years old. And I had, at the time, 4 siblings, so a family of 7 of us on a boat. And I can't remember how many of us were on there. I hear a couple hundred, but it was a relatively small boat. It's a fishing boat, and we left in the middle of the night and down a river and then out to sea, and then took that boat out to international waters.
For those not familiar with what's termed the boat people and what you were fleeing from Vietnam, could you give a little background on that?
Oh, yeah, sure. So back in 1975, right, that's when the Americans left Vietnam, marked kind of the end of the war. And in the years following, all of the remaining families were kind of left in shambles, really, of just kind of the state of the things in the country, and everybody was trying to get out. And so in those years, that's what everybody was trying to do, looking for better opportunities. And those who were fortunate enough to leave in 1975, that was great. But for the remaining families, it was always about trying to find a way out and finding a way to America. And so we were one of those families where, and I don't even know if there were other attempts at it. I'm sure there were. Sometimes these things took a lot for the family to be able to cobble together enough money or jewelry or gold and be able to hand over to somebody, just trusting that they're going to be there when they say they are, meeting us in the middle of the night and then shepherding us out to sea. And so we were one of just thousands and thousands of families that took to sea in the face of death and piracy and a number of things, just harrowing experience, all in the name of just trying to get out and look for better opportunities.
I read a stat where I think it was from 1975 to 1995, there were about 800,000 people that tried to make the voyage like you did, and anywhere between 200 to 400,000 did not make it. So, to your point, very harrowing. I know you were only 4 years old. Do you have any memories of that voyage and of first landing in the US?
I do. It's amazing because I had visited Vietnam a couple of years ago, and just some of the memories I've always kind of harbored, and other memories just kind of came flooding back. And even that young age, I think it's just something about just the brain and things that get impressed into your mind that makes you remember. So I do remember being on the boat. I do remember my younger brother learning how to walk. I do remember eating rice porridge with salt. So just images, really, more than just actual experiences. I do remember wondering, like, what the heck we were doing. I remember that, kind of just thinking at that, even at that young age. And then just coming over to America, obviously, just the awe. I think we were in Hong Kong and we flew out of Hong Kong over to America, but just the sheer bigness of everything coming from a small city or area, neighborhood, I should say, and being at that age and just seeing what the world is just like, it just opened your eyes, like all this incredible, incredible stuff out there. It's interesting, Simon. I want to share this because when I went back, 'cause I just thought of this actually, when I went back in 2015, I think was the first time that I took my family back there to Vietnam, and we were in Saigon. So part of it was kind of just reconnecting, rediscovering, right, my country, my culture. But I was asking my mom about like kind of, where did we grow up again? And there's all these districts, Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City, right? We're going to be official.
Is that where you were born and where
I was born,
Okay.
yeah, born in Saigon. And so there's all these different districts. I'm like, Mom, which district did we grow up in? And what's the address? And so I took a taxi out there to District 11. And I still remember because our house backed up to this railroad and a railway. And I remember as a kid, one of my daily pastimes was to try to find some rocks and put it on that railway and wait for the train because the train would come by like consistently, every day in the afternoon, whatever time it was for all the commuters. And so I'd set this rock on the railway, just hoping to see the train come by and just smash it to smithereens. And every day I'd go there and try it and just fail miserably because, inevitably it would just get vibrated and rocked off of the rail. But I came back there, I saw that railway. I saw it. And so that's where all the memories just started flooding back. And there was this gentleman, he was standing outside of that house, his doorway, kind of smoking a cigarette. And at the time I was just big on just, again, rediscovering, and I had my camera. I talked to everybody that I could, try to just soak it all in. So I strike up a conversation with this gentleman. And so he was explaining to me that, he's lived here for over 40 years. And throughout the course of that conversation, learned that he had been our neighbor. He knew my family. He knew my dad. We played with his kids in that neighborhood. And he said that, it's amazing because they never really knew exactly what happened to us. I mean, they could surmise what happened to us, but he said like just one night without any warning or any discussion or anything like that, you guys just disappeared like in the middle of the night. And he was like, the whole neighborhood for a while was just thinking, what happened to this family? Where are they? Are they sick? Are they in the hospital? Did they move out of town? So there was all of that. And then he jokingly said, yeah. And then after several days, we broke into your house and took your furniture. We figured you guys weren't coming back.
So did he still have the furniture too? Was he like sitting on your old rocking chair?
Yeah, I should have staked claim to that, right? It's like, hey, wait, that's ours right there. I think that's my granddad's. You better give that back. But and that's pretty typical, I would think, for other Vietnamese families. And so that was just amazing just the chance of that, right?
Well, it's so great that you got to go back and visit and have those memories and reconnect. I think that's such a gift to get that opportunity. Coming to the US, and you arrived in San Jose, is that right? Is that where
Yes.
you first lived and you
Yeah.
grew up there?
Yeah.
What memories do you have of trying to, and I don't even know if I want to call it assimilate. I don't know if that would have even been the goal, but just adjusting to life in the US. What were some of your early memories of that and experiences that come to mind?
So when I was 4, one of the first experiences I remember was my mom just not understanding the school system and how it all worked and everything, kind of trekking me into one of the elementary schools, thinking, okay, I mean, this is America, and we came here for my son to get an education, and here he is, take him, and learning that I wasn't of age yet to be in school. I was only 4, but just the language barrier, not only personally, but observing kind of how everything seemed so foreign, and the fact that my parents didn't quite seem to, you know, they struggled with it, right? Just so many times just waiting around in waiting rooms. I'd see like perplexed looks on my parents' face about forms. I remember us, for example, being in line for like the DMV, and being in line for like, 'cause back then as a family, we just did everything together, and so we went everywhere together, and just being at the DMV and seeing my dad wait in line for an hour, only to be told he was in the wrong line, and then having to go to another line. And so just things like that kind of just stuck with me, of part of that experience of assimilating is just the language barrier, learning how things worked. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it sounds like it was not only challenging, but frustrating, and probably a sense of feeling a little lost. And that I was reading an article on studyusa.com about you that talked about how, this struggle to really find that sense of belonging and fitting in. And it seems like if you were going through those experiences at that young age, that would really imprint that sense of not having a real feeling of belonging. Is that accurate? Am I off base?
Yeah, absolutely, Simon. That was a big theme of my early life, and I would say continues to be a theme in my life, and I think, and it happens in phases, right? So when you're a 4-year-old, it's more just these gut feelings about how you don't fit, but you don't know how you don't fit because you don't know any better. I remember playing on the playground and not knowing how to ask, hey, is my turn on the swing? And so pushing some poor girl off the swing because I didn't know how to communicate, and then my parents getting a call from the teacher and saying, hey, what's going on with your son? Does he have an issue with violence, or what's going on here? I just didn't know how to communicate. So little things like that. I have a lot of memories just early on, just in kindergarten, of just trying to assimilate, because I think that was when I was kind of most impressionable. Along the way, you kind of figure out, right? You develop these mechanisms and these techniques, and you have, a thought process, kind of thinking through how do you do this strategically. But when you're 4 or 5 or 6 in the early years, in kindergarten, in first grade, it's kind of survival mentality of just trying to figure out where you fit in. I had a girl in kindergarten. I don't know if you can consider her my first girlfriend. She may have been. I don't know this because we didn't speak, but apparently she made me sit next to her every day, when you sit in the circle. And she even threatened me, like if I didn't sit next to her, because she lived at the corner of my street on Locke Drive in San Jose, and they owned a dog. And that dog was on a chain, and sometimes it got loose. And, every person from Vietnam who comes over to America is deathly afraid of dogs. I mean, we had dogs in Vietnam, but we just didn't have, these kinds of dogs. And so I was deathly afraid of that dog. And so she threatened me with that. So, she
sounds like a girlfriend. That sounds like a girlfriend.
Yeah, we were committed, right? It was a mutual symbiotic relationship.
Instead of like a wedding ring, it was the dog that was kind of binding you.
Yeah, that's kind of a, comical story in some ways, but there were others that I think that were challenges that were a little bit more, that hit me a little deeper. And I still remember to this day, and things like, for me to this day, like shoes is still a big trigger. You're probably wondering, well, shoes. Well, my first pair of shoes in America was a pair of Mary Janes that we got probably from a local organization or the church or something like that. My parents didn't know that these were girl shoes. I didn't know they were girl shoes. I sported them around like, okay, I got shoes, So I wore those around, but got teased a lot and didn't understand why. And shoes was a thing, right? Like shoes was Even at show and tell, I remember, as the other kids were bringing their new Millennium Falcon or whatever, I brought this little thing that my dad helped me build. I'll never forget this. He's like, show and tell. I'm like, Dad, I don't have any toys. What am I going to show and tell? He's like, oh, you know what? I got something for you, son. When I was a kid, we used to make these things. We take 2 cans and then we attach a string to them. And then you can do all different kinds of things. Look at, you can play telephone. And so when I was demonstrating this in front of my class, I was telling the class, hey, you guys take off your shoes because I can show you how you can use these things as stilts, right? And you can kind of walk around them like clogs. And everybody's just like, what is this guy doing? Like taking off his shoes and going barefoot and then, of course, there's the whole taking off the shoes in a Vietnamese family.
Right.
That was big. So all the friends who came over, had to take off shoes. And they thought it was something religious. They thought it was something cultural. And it was, because most Vietnamese households in Vietnam wanted to you didn't want to trek in, right? All the dirt and grime from the streets into the home. But my dad was kind of a clean freak and he just wanted things to be clean. And so we ripped out all the carpets and installed this kind of new parquet floor, wood flooring. And so everybody had to take off the shoes because we wanted it to stay clean. But everybody just assumed it was some religious, cultural thing. And it was just because we wanted to be clean.
How important was it for your family to hold on to aspects of your culture, your Vietnamese heritage, and at the same time try to assimilate? Like, what was that balance for you?
I can speak for my family a bit. For my parents, I hadn't had a lot of conversation with them on this, but I imagine that must have been really, really difficult. And now as a parent, I'm kind of sensing that they must have gone through these struggles because I struggle with it as well. But I would say, if anything, back then, it was probably more erring towards just helping us to assimilate, right? Wanting us to be able to do the best that we can in school and to be able to get ahead and to be able to thrive. And even for my own family, it was possibly even at the expense for going and sacrificing some of the cultural things. I mean, we were a religious family, and I think my parents were probably, if anything, more focused on kind of that religious upbringing, and dedication to our religion than to some of the cultural aspects. Although they would share things with us all the time, right? And tell us about Vietnam and tell us what it would be like if we were kids in Vietnam. And, if you're not going to eat that, well, the kids in Vietnam, this is, how we grew up and things like that. So they tried, but I think that they weren't hard up about it. They weren't sticklers about it. I think they wanted to have that balance and give us that space and that opportunity to assimilate and to learn the ways of being American. Of course, now I'm struggling with that a bit.
With your kids?
With my kids. And
Yeah.
I think, at least my parents, I think they erred on that side because they didn't have that opportunity, right? I mean, I can sit back, my wife, Taylor, and I can sit back and go, okay, what do we want to do with the kids? But that's more of a philosophical conversation. And for my parents, it was about survival. We risked our lives to bring you over here. We spent our last dime and now you're here. And we would want nothing more than for you to be able to be successful. But I think all in the back of their mind, in their hearts, they had always wanted to make sure that at our core that we were still true Vietnamese, right? So they did teach us Vietnamese. They made us learn Vietnamese. They made us go to Vietnamese school. So things like that. And with my kids, it's now kind of the same. I'm a little bit remiss in not having forced the issue a little bit because, and to all the Vietnamese American peers that I have out there, I'll tell them this right now. If they haven't had kids or they're having young kids, is there will be a day when your kids will turn around if they're Vietnamese American and ask you, why did you not force me to learn Vietnamese? I think many of them would, and especially now that we're a generation in, right, here in America, you're going to have many who are going to want to reconnect with their culture and their background and their language and then look around and realize, oh, I'm not that Vietnamese, and I wish I knew the language. And so, and I always said that I wouldn't want to be the generation that messes that up, right? I should, and maybe it's not too late. My kids are in college, and I've got a young one at home, Matthew, who's in high school. But so it's never too late. So we can still try that. But you never want to be that generation that screws that part up, right? It's okay, if you have to force them, and then let the next generation kind of figure out what they want to do with that.
Isn't that interesting how that kind of flipped? Your parents
Yeah.
were really about trying to help you assimilate, and understandably. And now with your kids, it sounds like there's wanting to connect them more with their Vietnamese heritage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they did the basics. We spoke Vietnamese as a household. They spoke to us in Vietnamese. We did not speak English. They tried where it came to language and certain cultural aspects, but they weren't sticklers per se. Yeah.
Even though academics is an integral part of your life now, I know that wasn't always the case. Could you talk about your time in high school and early college and share some of your struggles that that time posed for you?
Sure. I have a lot of kind of mixed feelings about kind of just and it's actually very serendipitous and paradoxical and just a surprise, I think, of where I've landed because I've had somewhat of a tumultuous relationship with education. And it goes back to some of the experiences that I'm sharing with you, right, in grade school. And a big part of it I've recently learned is I think some of my trauma around just something as simple as my name, right? So my name is Dũng. That's my Vietnamese name. And the American pronunciation of that is Dung. You can imagine that's not an easy name to grow up with and
No.
enter into new classes and new grades and meeting new friends with. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but so early on, it's like, okay, it's an odd name, and once in a while, I'll get teased about it, but I didn't know what the meaning was. And so that was always hard because I remember skipping the first day of classes just so that I wouldn't have to hear my name called. I remember waiting around outside the classroom all the way through college of waiting for the professor, so hoping that I can catch him or her and be able to say, hey, by the way, you look at your roster, you're going to see this name. I'd like to be called Danny, or this is how you pronounce it, or, that was kind of traumatizing for me, I think, growing up and trying to own that name and trying to assimilate with that name. And incidentally, my name at home is really Yuan. That's my birth name.
Yoan.
Yeah, Yuan, Duan. And it's also the name of a Vietnamese communist official that I think gained more power, as Ho Chi Minh kind of waned and got sick. But anyways, nobody liked him. This guy was, in our minds, evil. And so my grandparents forced my parents to change that to Dũng, to Dung. But at home, they still call me Bjorn, and I still had throughout grade school and high school, I still had moments where I'm like, man, I wish they could have kept that as my official name because to Americanize that, I would have been Dwayne. And even Dwayne wasn't that cool of a name back then, but it is now,
It
right?
is now, yeah. When
It
you
is
have like
now.
basketball
So
players like Dwayne Wade and
yeah, Dwayne the Rock Johnson. Yeah,
right,
so
right.
so I remember I had so many times where I'm like, oh man, I wish that because that's what they call me at home. And then Danny is a name that I took on and I've legally changed my name since. And that was hard for me too. But, actually having processed it and come to terms with it and all of those things, I'm like, okay, I'm ready now. And I officially changed my name. And that's a name of a grade school friend that I had. He lived down the block from us and across the street from us, I should say, and Daniel Gameyer. And he was just the sweetest boy. And his family was really sweet and really good to us. One of my first friends that accepted me. And I just thought it'd be a nice name to take on.
So, in spite of all those struggles and challenges and discomfort around education, you are now in the education field. Was there one turning point during your high school or college journey that all of a sudden it shifted and you thought, oh, I'm actually going to go into this world as a profession? Or was it a series of events that led you there?
No, that's a great question, Simon, because it was a journey. It was by no means was there an epiphany or there was a conscientious decision. It was all part of just my path and my journey. And so in high school was pretty rough. I didn't do well. I think I rebelled at some point. And that was part of what I think a lot of people kind of struggled, a lot of people in my generation, Vietnamese Americans struggled with is just kind of just that sense of identity and who we are. What does it mean to be Vietnamese American? What are the expectations of your family? Did I really want to be on the path to becoming a doctor like my brother? Did I want to be an engineer? All those pressures. And so there are a couple of years where I rebelled a little bit. I found a group of friends that I never had before, and they were more because growing up, I was trying to be American. I had a lot of American friends. And so I found this group that I was like, oh, this is what teenage boys, like Vietnamese American teenage boys are like, and all the bad words that they taught me and what they like to do and just the culture and hanging out at cafes and doing certain things. So I got into that and got in a little bit of trouble. And so it was a really, real struggle. But I had some teachers that, always was able to see bright spots in me, always believed in me, always managed to kind of steer me back onto the right path. And so even in college, I struggled with college too. So it's amazing that I'm actually an educator because I failed out so many times. I could have failed in high school. I went to 3 different high schools. By the time I got to San Jose State, I got on academic probation my first year, my first semester, got kicked out, had to get myself reinstated. But all along, there was always somebody there, in addition to just the support of my family, which I always had, but just that one teacher or that one supporter who believed in me or when I didn't or guided me back. And so then I went to pharmacy school, right? When I got out of pharmacy school, that's what I thought I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a pharmacist, but I didn't intentionally desert pharmacy. I think I just started to choose where I felt right. And at the time when I was working at Eli Lilly doing pharmaceuticals, I lived down the street from Mission College. And I wasn't feeling that great about what I was doing, almost a little bit disenchanted of what I thought I was going to be doing. So many of us probably have that, right? Where we come out, we're on this career path, we're on the straight and narrow, and we come out and we're thinking, oh, I'm going to be helping old people with their medications and with their ostomy products, and it's going to be so awesome. And then learn that, no, that's not actually what the work entails.
The corporate world comes in and
The
you realize
corporate
what's
world.
underneath all of that.
Exactly.
It's not always for the good of people.
Exactly. And, and being young and idealistic too, right? I own up to that. And who knows what my path could have been if I wasn't so idealistic and decided to, you know what, I want to go look for something else. And so at the time, I just stopped into Mission, and there was a dean, Phil Pabish, he was so great, and he was trying to start up a pharmacy program. And so he invited me in to do some consulting and help him build a program. And from the moment that I stood in front of a class and taught a class, so if there is a moment, Simon, I guess you're helping me answer this question for myself, is that, yeah, that was the moment. And then thereafter, starting to feel like being around this community that I'm seeing that just take such fulfillment in their work, right? This community here at Mission College and all the faculty and staff who just take so much pride and joy and fulfillment in helping students. And I'm like, wow, what? So they're on something. And and I'm feeling it too. Even then, I didn't think I was making this conscious decision to be an administrator or be an educator. I just followed my heart and I said, okay, I'll do that. And then one thing led to the next, and there was another opportunity to become a director and another opportunity then to become a dean. And at every turn, I chose education. And so in that respect, it hasn't been a surprise. And I think now as we reflect back on my educational journey, I do see it. I do see that arc of like, every time that I got into some trouble, anytime that I doubted myself, anytime that I was kind of going off my path and getting into stuff that I should, education always kind of took me back. It always took me back, and it always gave me that opportunity to reinvent myself and give myself another chance. And so I just love that fact that now I'm able to do it. I feel so blessed that I'm able to continue to do this work that gave me so many opportunities, and then just try and find ways to give back and connect with other students that may be feeling, and experiencing what I've experienced.
You said you had great support from your parents and family, and that you also did have, whether it was instructors or other people along the way that helped in your journey and kind of picked you up when you were feeling down. You mentioned one person, the dean from Mission College. Are there any other people that you want to mention or point out that were really instrumental in that journey for you?
There was Mrs. Alkire back in Sylvandale. Shout out to Sylvandale Middle School. She was this amazing, beautiful soul, my music choir instructor, who saw something in me that I had no idea was there, and invited me into singing group. I'm not a singer, all right? But looking back, thinking about the work that she did of taking some inner city kid who just didn't know anything about this world and trying to show him the beauty of music and just what it means to be able to express yourself and finding a way to fit in, even though you don't think that you fit in. And just through that experience of being in front of people and feeling like I belonged to a group, a singing group, and then getting in front of the class and gaining some popularity in doing that, that really helped me to connect with my school and my peers. And she was just an amazing, amazing person. And I just wonder, right? Like, she's just one teacher. I mean, throughout my whole life, I've had plenty of teachers like that. And I know out there, all of our, our listeners and students out there, I'm hoping everybody's got that one person on their journey that can help them and support them and really believe in them, because sometimes it's just we don't believe in ourselves and we don't feel like we belong. And so having that teacher or somebody in our lives, it makes a world of a difference.
Thank you again for listening to International Student Stories. And thank you to our team for putting together this episode. Stories are meant to be shared, so please pass the story on to a friend or family member who needs to hear a good story. A few other quick notes. I invite you to check out the show notes if you want more details on some of the topics discussed in this episode. For all the latest podcast news, stop by our website, studyintheusaglobal.com/podcast. That's STUDY in the USA global.com/podcast. Subscribe to the International Student Stories podcast to be alerted on new episodes. And contact us if you know of a current or former international student whose story needs to be shared with the world. Goodbye for now, be well, and much love to each and every one of you.